I find it fitting that the church puts together St. John and St. Paul today. We don't necessarily know any interaction that these two men had outside of the times in which St. Paul went to Jerusalem and to meet with the apostles, and therefore would have met with St. John as long as he was there amongst the 12. We know for sure Paul interacted with St. Peter because Peter talks about Paul and Paul talks about Peter. Neither of them are very flattering. Okay? But Paul doesn't talk about John and John doesn't talk about Paul. It is also interesting that between St. Paul and St. John, you have the largest section of the New Testament. The vast majority was written by these two people. And by a certain extension, if you take into consideration the high probability that Luke's gospel and the Acts of the Apostles, those stories were related to him by St. Paul. Then you add Luke's contributions to St. Paul's, and all of a sudden, Paul and John have written everything except for the handful of pages of the other apostolic letters and maybe the Gospel of Mark. Paul is wrapping up his journey. His missionary journey is over. He is now under house arrest. This is the closest thing we get to a conclusion of the Acts of the Apostles. The death of St. Paul, the death of St. Peter, neither of those is recorded, presumably because when Luke was sending this out, he didn't feel that was... Either he sent the Acts of the Apostles out to the community before it happened, or it was such a current event he didn't feel the need to record it. But you notice at the end of his life, St. Paul begins to live a very different life. He's a very public person for a long time. And then all of a sudden, he's still a public person, but instead of him coming to you, you got to go to him. And this is the way that the life of hermits specifically have played out. These people that go out into faraway, remote areas to live alone with the Lord and to pray and to be quiet and to contemplate and to wrestle with the devil. People would come to them for advice. And the same thing happened to St. John, right? Paul only for 2 years. St. John for a long time. But you got to go to Patmos because that's where the apostle is. And they would come to him and seek advice, guidance, maybe reconciliation, maybe direction, maybe ordination. But you would go to them. So St. Paul does his writings, St. John does his writings, and the people come. And it sort of shows the way in which the apostolic life can shift. You know, St. Paul, both of them were for political reasons, right? St. Paul was in prison, St. John was exiled, but for political reasons, they are no longer amongst the free people walking around. So it wasn't necessarily their choice. But you'll notice the modern world allows a level of transportation that didn't exist in the ancient world. You know, in the not too distant past, you get these major evangelists, and they travel and they travel and they travel and they travel. A lot like the entertainers. They'll tour and tour and tour and tour. And at some point they're just like, I'm tired of touring. Let's go find a room in Vegas. Okay, you want to go see us? Come to Vegas. We ain't getting on a plane no more. And I think the early apostles, especially, not apostles, but bishops, these figures, as long as they were not under persecution, that's often what they would do. They would give and give and give and give, and then at a certain point they're like, I can't do this anymore. You got to come to me. But the Lord had provided them such wisdom that people were encouraged. They chose to travel long distances. I'm going to come to you. And there they found wisdom. It's two different phases of life. One where you're in the trenches and you're doing the hard work and you're burning and exhausting yourself. But it's good and it's important because it's worth it. And then at a certain point, okay, I can't do this anymore. And if it was good enough for Paul and it's good enough for John, it's good enough for the rest of us too.